Happening now. We want to welcome our viewers from across the United States and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room, episode number 377, and today is July 1st, 2026. My name is Jason Neiffer. I am the Executive Director of the Montana Digital Academy, which is Montana State Virtual School located on the beautiful University of Montana campus in fabulous Western Montana, where it is chilly and rainy this week in Western Montana, which reminds me, this Saturday is my wife and I's 22nd anniversary. We got married on July 4th, 2004. The reason why is because both of our parents were married on July 4th, and we couldn't ignore the coincidence.
Wow.
We had a beautiful outdoor wedding, but it was cold and windy on July 4th, and I think there was snow a couple of mountains over. So this weather just reminds me of our wonderful ceremony. But hey, this is not wedding confessions with Jason Neiffer. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Joining me tonight is Dr. Wesley Fryer in North Carolina. Good evening, Dr. Fryer.
Good evening, Jason. Yes, I am a middle school media literacy and STEM teacher here in North Carolina. I am wearing my, you know what this is? If it flies, you know what the rest of this is?
Is that a bird's not?
It spies.
It's a spies. Yeah, that's the bird's not real movement.
Yeah, so birds aren't real. Because I've been teaching a unit for about 6 or 7 years on what I call Fruit Loop conspiracy theories and helping kids learn about lateral reading and the SIFT web literacy framework. I was thinking, Jason, do you remember when it was a Montana, maybe it was Montana State, emailed us about syndicating our show to maybe put us on the radio or something? I was thinking maybe we need to have a clipped version, because people probably don't want to hear the banter at the beginning, even though I really enjoy this part. But yeah, I don't know. That was. We need to go syndicate it, man. We need to go on, Montana AM radio. I think that would be that's our ticket forward.
I think it is too, and clearly embracing the old and the new tech all at once, right?
Hey, if I could get a license, I actually looked into it. Nonprofit organizations, when it's open, and the FCC apparently doesn't have it open, can register for like local broadcast licenses, to broadcast on AM or FM. So I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, that would be really cool, actually. And I've always loved radio. Radio has been a kind of an important thing to me. Absolutely. And I think that's something cool to think about.
That's right. As I'm working with oral history and still doing things with local historical associations, those are things that are on my mind. So okay, good. You're getting some rain, so maybe the fires are going to be abated. Have you had some fires in your neighborhood yet?
No, we haven't actually. And it's May when we were gone, and then June it's been pretty wet months. So that doesn't guarantee that we won't have fires, but it's a pretty darn good start. So because it was very dry going into May this year.
Oh gosh, and Utah and some other areas, I've watched some videos. We are hot as can be. We are in the 90s, and it's going to be a hot weekend. But man, there is so much going on, because sometimes in the summer it seems like we've had just like dry shows. Well, there's really nothing going on now. Of course, it's ISTE, so there's going to always be some tech announcements because of that. But there's a lot going on, and we haven't, we skipped a week, so it's been intermittent. So if you're joining us live, I did do a shout out to Peggy and my dad. So who knows who will be here live, but if you're here, welcome.
Well, excellent. Here in the EdTech Situation Room, we take a look at news from around the world, and usually it's technology based. We kind of shoot it through the educational prism in hopes of perhaps providing some commentary or insight. We have a ton of AI news, as we have every week for the last couple of years now. Privacy news. I do want to talk about Apple a little bit tonight, because they had huge price increases announced last week, and I have a little story to share regarding that. Some open web discussion, some miscellaneous, and then we'll end tonight with our Geeks of the Week. Dr. Fryer, since you did the bulk of our link work tonight, where would you like to start our discussion this evening?
There are so many places to start, but I actually think, at the risk of derailing the show and making this the focus, which we don't have to do, let's start with the article about the EdTech backlash. I put this in the miscellaneous. This is Education Week from April 30th. And it's a fantastic article called The EdTech Backlash is Here, What It Means for Schools. And we have talked about this on the show numerous times. The article mentions Jonathan Haidt. It gives statistics for the number of schools that are pushing back and all the celebrity heavy hitters, Oprah, Hugh Grant, Senator Ted Cruz, folks who are really trying to basically push back against all screen time and all technology use, not differentiating between the two. The article references a website I had not heard of before called Close Screens and Open Minds. And actually, Union County, North Carolina, which is the county that we live in, is cited in here for the positive focus that their leaders have the positive uses of technology, the ways in which they were prepared for the pandemic, and basically, EdTech advocates, but not just for EdTech, for the appropriate uses and the ways that they can be differentiated and meet student needs, et cetera, et cetera. So I just would commend this article to folks. And I think this is absolutely one of the most important topics in the realm of educational technology for us to be aware of and to be able to articulate. I think it will be not just interesting, but it'll be a big deal to see how schools are going to respond to this, because this is on the minds of parents. We've had many states and state legislatures now pass laws regarding cell phones. And then we've also got AI coming into the mix. And there's just basically a whole lot of negativity. And I think one of the most important things to talk about is how all screen time is not created equal, and how there's a big difference in creating some kind of media, video conferencing, whether even that's with a grandparent for a child, or it's a class, a student. Anyway, the transformative potential of educational technology is something that Dr. Neiffer and I have been talking about for years. In fact, our whole careers we've been talking about this, and so I feel like it's an attack directly on many of the things that we're really passionate about. And some of the antidotes for this is not just banning the tech, it's helping teachers and administrators learn how to use these tools and how to navigate this new world of literacy, because we are not in 1953 anymore, folks. And we've got to learn how to effectively learn and avoid traps of disinformation and misinformation and communicate in this world. And I don't think we should pretend like, here, give me my paper textbook, my Big Chief tablet, and my, whatever we used in the one-room schoolhouse. Give me my slate and chalk, and I'll be good. Yes, we can learn critical thinking in all kinds of situations, but the ban tech bandwagon is alive and well. I would guess you're not completely insulated from that up in Big Sky Country.
Not at all. We expect it to be a major discussion topic in January at the 2027 Montana legislature. But and we talked about this our last couple of episodes, so it's not a new topic to our regular listeners. But the bottom line for me has always been that I get it that we're asking for nuance in an era where nuance isn't particularly valued, but there is no all tech all the time voice, because that also is not very realistic either, and punishes anyone that wants to try to find balance between these two concepts. But for me, the thing that is just very concerning is that we don't leave this up to the local communities that should be making these decisions: school boards, administrators, teachers. And there are a lot of schools that do a heck of a job with this, right? That have a very thoughtful program, that are created a meaningful regime inside the school to figure out when the tech comes out and when it goes away. And we shouldn't punish those schools for preparing students for the future. That doesn't mean that I don't have concerns about screen time. That doesn't mean that, I tend to think that the same bad pedagogy that was bad before computers just gets fueled with computers, right? So that's a really complex place to be in, because I think these all go back to teaching and learning questions and not technology questions. But I get why people are concerned. But I also feel like there is an absolute panic on the part of the anti-screen advocacy movement that is looking for fast and not thoughtful action, for whatever reason. The other thing that I also would agree with is that I think a lot of ed tech companies are shills for things that all of us can agree is not a great thing. Student data privacy has been a focus for the last 10 years. The notion of where your data goes, a very important question. But the United States hasn't even regulated social media yet. Now 22, 23 years old. There's just no scenario in which other than state bans in schools, because I don't think that there would be any appetite for, AI is, by executive order, not going to be regulated by the states. But I think that there's just a lot of troubling signs around this, because there are schools that do an outstanding job at this, right? And I would argue it's the lack of professional learning, it's the lack of opportunities to help teachers grow and thrive in this environment that has led us to this point. And I will say too that as a somewhat advanced tech teacher in my teaching days, I had to find my own professional learning because there was nothing locally to push me. That sometimes meant a conference, that sometimes meant a lot of self-study, and that's where I think these discussions become much more nuanced and then ultimately complicated.
Yeah. Well, we have, kind of beat this horse for a while, but again, it's summer, we're going to the school year. And I think this is, this and AI, just in terms of Google search and, the ways in which AI is being integrated into these different tools and the challenges that it will pose for us, as well as the opportunities that it will provide for us as teachers designing instructional materials and assessments and all of that. So where would you like to go next, sir?
Well,
or would you like me to choose another random weird one before we jump into the AI?
I love your random weird ones, and I do want to talk about Apple too.
Okay, all right. The miscellaneous category is just kind of fun here. So here is, and I'm interested in an update on your home DIY situation. We lost internet last night. Our fiber provider was doing maintenance, and we lost it for 6 hours. So I couldn't, turn off I could turn off my backyard lights because I've switched to Home Assistant. So here's an article from Make Use Of. This was from June 24th, 2026. Headline: I run my whole house on Home Assistant, and Prime Day is the cheapest time to actually start. So I need to continue to move forward in my own use of Home Assistant. And we've talked about this before. This is a Raspberry Pi based DIY free alternative to Amazon's Alexa ecosystem or the Google Home ecosystem. I am using mine in tandem with Google Home because Google Home is what I primarily have, but it provides other ways to connect, and it provides some resiliency because, for instance, when the internet is down, I can do nothing with Google Home. But now that I have Home Assistant installed and is running locally, again, on a Raspberry Pi, I'm able to open up the app. It connects locally, and I can still, for instance, control lights, which is basically what I'm doing with it at this point. So Jason has left the building. He stepped out for a moment, so we'll hope he's going to return. He has simply paused his camera. So while he departs, hey, why don't I do this? I'm going to share my screen, and we'll talk about a few more of these sort of miscellaneous articles while he before he returns. This is really fun. This is from Open Culture, and Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks, I didn't know this, had been separated into two parts, and they have been reunited and put online. So this is an Open Culture article from June 24th, 2026. And according to the article, one of the inheritor of Da Vinci's notebooks basically separated them into two sections. He actually cut them, And so they were cut into a section that was the largest, that focused on technical and scientific topics, and then the smaller one was focused on artistic and figurative. And of course, he had his very famous backwards writing. But I think this is really cool, because creativity and also technology and art, these things go together. And so it seems like it was an artificial separation to try to say, oh, we need to, put the scientific and technical stuff aside from the creative. So this was another just sort of random miscellaneous category. Jason, you're back. What is your home? I was doing the home assistant article. Do you have any updates? Are you continuing the journey for the home assistant? Maybe is that why you bailed out? Did you have to go grab your Raspberry Pi?
Deal with the security issue? No. I had to deal with the my dog is being a little impatient tonight. But,
okay.
So I am running Home Assistant right now. And the reason why I certainly want to comment on this one is that, and this relates to AI, but only in a, kind of a, what I've been doing it with it sort of way. But, I do think there's a lot of risk in AI getting inserted into critical learning environments thoughtlessly or inappropriately. But what I have been able to learn in the last year, because of the availability of AI, has really extended my technology skills. And I think I've said this before a couple of different times, but I always perceived that I have a lot of tech skill, but it's limited. And so sometimes I would find something on the internet that gave me an interesting idea, and then I'd run up against the wall and I'd spend 10-20 minutes Googling, and if I couldn't get it figured out, then I just gave up. Well, that's not been the case since AI has been available. And you mentioned a Raspberry Pi. This is one of the mini PCs that have been available mostly to corporate clients in the last 10 years or so. But this was, $50 on eBay, and I put Linux on these and then run them as little mini servers at home. And I can host tons of digital tools, including something like Home Assistant on this. And one of the things that I've actually done, and I think I mentioned this, I bought a couple of used old trash can Macs, the Mac Pro from 2013, because they go for a song now because they're not supported anymore. Those are running as servers in my house too, to host some experimental AI tools. And I would have never been able to pull that off if it wasn't for AI, because the bottom line is that ChatGPT and Claude will walk me through errors, and I also tell it, don't just give me the commands, explain it to me, right?
Yes.
Like, I want to understand this stuff.
Yes.
And so I know much more than I did even 2 months ago. And I set up some really wild stuff at home utilizing various types of AI agents. I think we talked about the Hermes agent a couple of weeks ago, which is my current preferred platform. But things like Home Assistant are more accessible to someone like me that typically wouldn't have time to butt your head up against the brick to try to install various software suites on alternative hardware. But AI has been a real game changer for me personally in that particular space.
I have so much appreciation today that I did not have 2 months ago for the terminal and the command line, because using mainly Claude, I am in the process of migrating my virtual private server that I've had on the same cPanel WHM for years, and it has been so bad in terms of cyber attacks. And this ties to the open web is closing articles that I've got in here, because AI bots, scrapers, the pressures that those put. But there is just no way I would be managing my server through the terminal and through a command line. And now I can do that pretty much everything through the command line. Now I am trusting Claude to do that. And I've had actually somebody on Blue Sky or Mastodon, was like, make sure you test all those and don't ever run a command that you don't completely understand. Well, I'm beyond that. I am trusting, but I've also built this essentially relationship, it sounds weird, with Claude, with this Claude project, where, anyway, we've been working for hours and hours and hours together, diagnosing, reading logs and error logs, creating a custom Python script it can run to check the health of my different sites. And then, there are many things that I can now type on the command line that I didn't before, but I usually just opt for it to, give me the exact syntax. And sometimes it will, and then this is with vibe coding as well. Sometimes it'll like, well, go to this line and do this. And I'm like, no, I want you to give me the full thing. I want to copy and paste it. I want you to make it easy for me. But your point about explaining, if people are not using these tools, I do not think that you would understand or appreciate just how powerful a tutor these tools can be. And yes, they can hallucinate. Yes, they can get things wrong. Yes, it's weird sometimes because you can sense a change in it. And I think we got this in the show notes. Fable's back, baby. I just ran my first Fable, it's been off for a month or something like that. And it's now the most powerful model that Anthropic has released. So.
Yeah, I agree totally with all of the above. And I don't disagree with, folks saying things like, well, don't ever run a command that you don't totally understand. But I think it's also different once you get past that baby novice standpoint, right? Like the only way to learn is to screw up. And, and there's something to be said about don't do this kind of crap on, a production machine. And in the same way too, that, 6 months ago when OpenClaw was released, I warned everyone, don't install this. And I would still tell you not to install this, but if you want to experiment with it, then get an old laptop, install Linux on it, and do it there.
It's playing with media. This is playing with media, finding a safe sandbox where you're not going to jeopardize your data, and the learning that can come from those kinds of iterative, exploratory, sometimes whimsical. Are you installing some new RAM?
No, I am. I'm trying to get this back together because I pulled it apart, but like a dumbass here. But yeah, totally right. And I do think, I said something a couple of weeks ago, and I'm not sure if I had a chance to say it here. I gave a presentation a couple weeks ago at the Montana Summer Office of Public Instruction Summer Institute, and one of the things I said there was that in a lot of ways, I'm the best person and the worst person to tell you about these AI tools. And the reason why is that my curiosity gets the best of me a lot, right? And I've always been someone that likes to dig into things and likes to understand better and wants to break something so I can fix it, like that sort of thing, right? And that is something wonderful and also vaguely terrifying about AI, right? Because I do think it can help you spin up, a lot of interesting things and give you a lot of extra capacity, but you also need to think about in service of what, right? And I think that's another part of this that I'm, really thinking a lot about because of, what's really happened with me in the last couple of years with understanding, things that I have no time to deal with in my professional life. And I used to do this kind of stuff for fun in my personal life, but it would only go so far. And now I have to say it is consuming me as I think about and look at these various tools and pieces. But a lot it's very interesting to kind of see it through this lens as of late.
Sounds good. But let's talk Apple. You want to talk about some Apple stuff?
I do. So Apple announced last week that they were raising prices on most of their products. And we knew this was coming because Tim Cook talked about this in a quarterly stock call and also had been talking to the media about it to kind of cushion the blow. The increases for most hardware is between $100 and $300. Some really high-end Macs are getting even larger increases. And it's the RAM shortage, right? The RAM shortage, which created, or I'm sorry, the AI created incentives for a lot of companies that were making RAM to switch. We talked about Micron in the United States, and the switch that they're doing to head more towards kind of an AI centric world for profit purposes. They were a major manufacturer of RAM. And so that's a problem, because RAM is a critical component in computers, and modern day systems can't get away with 2, 4, 8 gigabytes anymore. I think the minimum you want is 16 gigabytes on a functioning machine, right?
Isn't that crazy to say? That's just crazy to say, but it's true. Yeah.
Yeah. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this was that I'd heard a little bit about this, but it became a big reality for me. So I updated to a MacBook Pro M5 earlier this year. It was they gave me a sweet deal on my M4 to trade in. And I'm not paying that much a month for a year to own the new one, and it was interest free, and so all good there. I'm really excited about that prospect, but it died a couple of weeks ago, and very unfortunate. I've never had a Mac straight up die before, so and it was a kind of a pain in the tush to get it shipped off to Apple. I had to go to my local Best Buy store. They were not helpful at all. That was where Apple sent me to go deal with it, and they told me that Apple gave me bad information. So I contacted Apple, and Apple said that Best Buy gave me bad information, so they had to take the box. Or they sent me a box, and I sent it back to them. Well, it went back to them last week, and made to them on Thursday. And Thursday, I got a message from them saying that they need to order a part. So I kind of wondered why that they just didn't send me another one, right? That's usually what they would do, is just send you a refurbished one. Well, one of the reasons why that's the case, I think, is because the reason why I updated was to get 64 gigabytes of RAM on my MacBook Pro. They don't offer a 64 gigabyte model anymore in the MacBook Pro M5. So it's, and I was shocked to see that. I also noticed that they're not offering a 64 gigabyte Mac Mini, which is something I invested in a year ago and scrimped and saved to get the extra RAM in there because of AI applications. They don't offer that anymore either.
Wow.
It's a max of 48 gigabytes. So not only have the prices increased, their higher end models just don't exist anymore. I also know that the Mac Studio, which is their highest end machine, used to have a cap out at 512 gigabytes of RAM. That is now down to 128 gigabytes of RAM. Now, if you're running a Mac Studio with 512 gigabytes of RAM, you are almost certainly doing some kind of high-end AI something or another. So that's that's who those machines were for. But the fact that they've capped the memory in these two really takes a lot away from the kind of high-end history that Apple has. I mean, they were amongst the first to standardize things like 4 and 8 gigabytes of RAM. When they introduced the the Mac products with the M4 chips in them, they bumped the minimum up to 16 gigabytes because that required now for smooth coverage. But very interesting that all these prices have increased. And I also noted that the MacBook Neo, which the starting price for that $599 was one of the major selling points of it, it has also been bumped to $699 due to the RAM shortage and computer part shortage around the world.
And that apparently is being driven by data centers. So I did drop a link to a 9 to 5 Mac article, which is titled, "When Will Apple's Prices Drop Again? Maybe Years, Maybe Never." And so as long as we are seeing this AI boom where apparently investors can't give AI companies enough money fast enough, and the build out of these supercomputers and all the stuff that goes with them, including RAM, as long as that continues, we're not going to see less expensive computers. It's affected, I know, at our school purchasing in terms of leasing. We lease some computers for some labs, and just too costly to get the towers that we'd had before. So we're getting laptops, and I hope that their performance is equal to, hopefully better than, the ones that we started with 3 years ago. But I don't know. We're having to make some compromises, and I'm sure that, again, return on investment is so important for pretty much everybody. Jason does sometimes turn over his phones and devices, but he also has a whole lot of other devices that are that he runs that have a lot of mileage and a lot of years on them, and schools certainly need to do that in many cases. So it's unfortunate,
totally,
because we're not going to be out of this RAM shortage anytime soon, I don't think.
No. And I would also note too that when I started playing around with these mini PC boxes, especially during the pandemic, when Raspberry Pis became a lot more rare to pick up for a couple of years due to supply chain issues, these mini PCs became the alternative. They do use more power, although not dramatically more power than the Raspberry Pis. That's why a lot of enthusiasts and home labbers were buying these particular pieces, and I was able to take something like this. This has got a 5 or 6 year old CPU on it, and easily get 32 gigabytes or 64 gigabytes of RAM to stick in these boxes. And as it turns out, you could do that easily for 120, 130 bucks used. That same RAM now costs $300 to $400, right? And so, very strange place. And I've also noticed too that you can pick up a lot of kind of tinkerers like myself will pick up 10 or 12-year-old workstations. I'm talking about the things that engineers would use with their software 10, 12 years ago as a home server. And the older memory is two generations old now, is DDR3 memory. That now is out of control, expensive, because a lot of companies that need a server and can't afford something new and have relatively light needs are also taking advantage of older equipment. And I think there's a chance here that things could get a lot worse before they get better, but it's certainly a very strenuous situation, and will absolutely impact schools.
Yes, it will. Could I do the open web article?
Please.
Okay, and then we probably should jump to AI. Have you noticed that the open web is on the ropes, Jason? It appears with logins.
I've heard that too.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned Cory Doctorow's enshittification. We've talked about that a few times, and the his arguments about sort of the trajectory of the web and big platforms that are monetizing their users. Here's an article from Ars Technica. This is from yesterday on June 30th, and the article is titled "Reddit will require you to log in to use old.reddit.com." And the subtitle is "Logged Out Old Reddit Access is, quote, a significant source of abusive scraping." And I am a huge fan of the open web. I can date myself now because, I think I made my first web page probably in 95 or something like that. I mean, I had done computing stuff before that, but as far as like putting a web page on the internet, I've been doing that for a while. And open websites that don't require logins and the scraping and the pressure that puts on websites, it's significant. And I think that's part of what I've been experiencing with my own websites. And it's just crazy with the logs and all of this, and the ways, again, where using AI in the terminal, it can help me decipher all of that. But I think that the open web is really important, and being able to share our ideas and having the opportunity to be able to do that without necessarily being on a platform like Facebook that's being owned by a big tech company, where all of the things that go with that, including advertising. There's another article I put in the same thread there. This is an older one from 2024, from February 1st, and it was said exploring Reddit's third-party app environment 7 months after the API collapse, which is basically Reddit was really clamping down on other people accessing their content. You needed to do it through Reddit, and this pressure, I guess, is continuing. But it reminds me of Twitter. I don't know if you used, Jason, some different third-party Twitter apps. There was a whole host of different ones that we would use back in the day before Twitter became X in order to, access tweets and then see them the way that we wanted to, filter them. And so I am just really passionate. I'll mention in a Geek of the Week, a new iteration of basically this project called Reclaiming Our News Feeds. And I think that utilizing open tools and then being able to, you've re-entered, being able to, for instance, use tools like Mastodon, Flipboard, YouTube, which are still creating an open feed like an RSS feed, and then being able to do things with those feeds of information is really powerful. And what we're witnessing, and I'm becoming more aware of, is sort of the closing of the web. And there's different reasons for that. I don't have this article, maybe we talked about it last time, but there's a persuasive case that, as much hand-wringing as we might do and others about Google, for instance, changing the search box and making AI primary, they kind of have to do that in some people's view because the web is just so different, right? It used to be, not that it was some perfect nirvana, wonderful place, but we didn't have as much gamifying and SEO tricks and people and slop and just a lot of crap for people trying to get clicks and ads. And yes, it's revenue, but like share good ideas, like have your own website and write good things. But all of this mix of stuff basically is rather toxic to the open web. So the open web still exists. It's still a place where I publish and share on WordPress sites as well as, other places, including Substack, which isn't, just like my own owned property. But anyway, I thought those articles about Reddit were interesting because I don't want a walled garden web. I don't want to have to log in and pay a subscription for everybody, to read anything. I love podcasts. I love the fact that, I guess China maybe has been monetizing there since the beginning. We read an article, shared one a long time ago about that. But I mean, the way that podcasts have grown up here in the United States, it's open. The RSS is the OPML. These are standard formats, and I think it's wonderful, and I'm glad that companies have not completely co-opted it. We do have subscription-based podcasts, and there's ways that people subscribe, and Spotify only, and those kinds of things. So anyway, any thoughts you have on any of that, Dr. Neiffer? And are you much of a Reddit user? Because actually, I could tie that to one other article about how important Reddit is to AI and how it's being poisoned.
Yeah, we should talk about that one because that one's really interesting. But I am a big Reddit user, in part because I consider it like it's better for my brain than just kind of flicking through the news every day, because I feel like the important stuff ends up getting shared on Reddit. But there was a funny meme that was going around a couple of weeks ago about how if someone had told a guy 10 years ago that there'd be a technology in the future that would make a web search obsolete, that shows you the answers from whether they're correct or not from a Reddit search from 20 years ago, you wouldn't believe that, right? But that is actually the situation that we're in right now, for sure. But the thing that I also think is very worthy of thinking about is that if the fear of having your intellectual property, right? I'm not entirely sure that my Reddit post should count as Reddit's intellectual property, but still, I get that part. Then that is a huge problem, because people are going to start putting things behind paywalls. I don't have a site to share here, but I did hear in a story a couple weeks ago about how one of the new ways that people are getting data to train models is by buying access or buying a copy of like defunct companies' email servers so they could read all the email to train models on writing, right? And so, startups that flamed out, before they were profitable, that's another income source for the creditors if they went bankrupt. So, just another example of how AI is really fueling a shift in the notion of value.
I wonder how much dark web resources are being used for scraping now. And companies are not talking about that because they're not proud of it. A project you and I should still consider doing someday is doing an investigation of like how much personal data is available on the dark web, and then how easy it is to get it. And then also, can we take it down and blah, blah, blah. Because I've read statistics that the public facing web is small compared to the dark web and what is hidden behind logins and things like that. So it's almost like the dark web is increasing. Dark web is different than just like logging into Reddit. But and what was I going to say? Something else. It just, so much of the benefit that the internet has brought to me as a professional and as a human being, I feel like comes from the open web. And so I think advocating for the open web, and of course the Fediverse, and we do have, fighters for open standards and trying to not be beholden to big tech and all that kind of stuff. So I think those are things that we may be doing. I'm certainly doing more on my own free time, I'm not teaching about those things professionally to middle schoolers. But it's really important. And so anyway, I thought these articles were indicative of some of those broader trends. Had you heard of the poisoning of AI?
I have heard of that. And I think this is a brilliant topic to talk about. So you want to describe what that whole thing is about?
You bet. I'm going to drop in an article, and then I'll give a shout out to Brian Turnbaugh up in Chicagoland, because he actually forwarded me a video from Instagram, which I found hard to get the data of for a while. But anyway, this is from Cyber News on June 26, 2026. DuckDuckGo AI hallucinates Trump's death after AI data poisoning campaign. And basically the summary is that DuckDuckGo's AI and many AI tools today are harvesting, scraping content from Reddit. Well, there is a Reddit thread or Reddit, the subreddit, and I've linked it. Please don't share this with students. There's all kinds of things that would not be appropriate to talk about in school, but it is called Poison AI. And so it reminds me of The Onion. I mean, there's just a lot of spoofs and parody things, but it is promoting itself as like the most authoritative and trustworthy place, to find information. And so DuckDuckGo took that information and shared that Donald Trump had died of rabies after apparently ingesting coordinated fake content. It was this. They died of rabies after this whole AI poisoning incident. And so for different reasons, people are trolling AI, I guess, and also just enjoying themselves. It is showing how misinformation can be amplified, and online fabricated content can be treated as credible evidence. And so there are real hazards to relying upon AI, for instance, for search and for news. And it's even more important to fact check. So hopefully we're going to continue to see AI platforms cite their sources. I think this points to, AI's inability to be able to identify humor and nuance and parody and trolling. I mean, I think this can be classified as trolling. So anyway, I had not heard anything about this. And so I appreciate Brian bringing this to my attention, because it is a really big deal, because we do have this big shift, and we haven't even mentioned ISTE and Google's announcements at ISTE, but there's big pivots in the world of ed tech towards AI. And with articles and things like this, of course, this will probably give more fuel to the fire for those saying, that's right, it's all garbage. And I better watch out. I better watch out what I say, because of how things can be clipped and put into reels, because I sometimes want to be silly. But like, yeah, it is a real problem. It's a big issue. We shouldn't ignore it. We need to talk about it and be aware of it, just like hallucinations and other kinds of realities that go with AI today.
Yeah, and the bottom line is that it highlights why it's problematic for AI to gather information and answer in these ways, is because it is subject to poisoning in the same way that when 3 years ago they were starting to dig into what trained models, that created its own funk as well, right? And all sorts of unpleasantries and downright criminal materials made it into various types of files. So always things to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Okay, sir. I've kind of directed the show here. Where do you want to go and talk about? We have about 15 minutes left.
Yeah, it'll be a rabbit hole no matter what. So maybe it's time to cover a little more AI. And I guess I would just start with the big headlines in the last 2 weeks that I think we missed the last time around was that Claude Fable had been released, which is a version of their Mythos model, which had dominated the news 4 months prior because of its perception that it had all of this power. And then 48 hours after it was released, the United States government issued a memo through the Department of Commerce that said that non-U.S. citizens, I believe, it wasn't even residents, it was citizens, were banned from accessing the Fable models. And so that created a situation for Anthropic where they couldn't really just narrow it down to just U.S. citizens, and that included their own employees in their own company that were not U.S. citizens. And I would imagine that Anthropic has offices around the world. Created a problematic situation, so they pulled it from everyone, and that created a lot of discussion, especially since we also know that ChatGPT 5.6, right, I think is the next version, has also been temporarily slowed down as the government reviews it, and may also be a candidate for it sounds like they're talking ahead of time now, so maybe not be a release and then pull back situation. But it was announced yesterday that the Department of Commerce has pulled their initial guidance, and in fact I just saw that Fable is now available in my Anthropic account.
Yeah, I just saw it pop up because I'm using Claude every day, so I noticed those kinds of things. In fact, I did use it. I like how Claude will let you change your model mid-conversation. And to me, it's just so fascinating, right? Think about an analog to like a classroom, because with these models, you can say how much effort you want it to expend and then which model you want to use, because the higher models and the greater effort will take more of your tokens and you will use up your allocated bandwidth or whatever, your allocated tokens faster. But it's just like, we would never have a student walk in and say, hey folks, today we're just going to be on 50% effort. Okay. Just give me your fast answer. But anyway, this is the kind of thing, it's a choice that we make when we use the tool, if we don't just go with the default. So I did copy and paste the links that I had picked up for the show tonight. I've experimented with doing some AI help with articles before. And then I said, hey, and I changed to Fable, and I said, hey, what are some other articles that would be good? And it gave me some great ones. So anyway, Fable, the power is now at our fingertips.
Yep, totally. And I would also say too, I only used it 2 or 3 times before the ban happened, and apparently the security and coding stuff is amazing. I don't really do either of those 2 things, but I can tell you it did a pretty interesting job of helping create tools to help manage my note vaults, and so that's something that delighted me, and I'm delighted to see that it's back.
Yep. And then here's a Reuters article. I guess this was from the 26th, but it says that, U.S. allowing Anthropic to release Mythos AI to trusted U.S. organizations. But see, we're Fable, not Mythos. They're not the same, are they?
No, those are different things. Mythos is the big one. Fable was the consumer release. And Mythos, I think that Anthropic made this call. It wasn't a U.S. government call, but they determined that they would not release it widely because they felt it was risky. And a lot of people thought that that wasn't real, that it was really just marketing hype.
Right.
That
Exactly.
with a model so powerful that we can't release it, right?
Right.
But go ahead.
No, that's exactly right. And it's like, trying to discern when we were hearing about security vulnerabilities with what was the Chinese company, the cell phone
Yeah,
company that was Huawei,
Huawei.
like, okay, is this really a security threat or not? And you're trying to figure it out. This is hard too. But yeah, the bottom line is if you're using these tools and then, you could be in a better position to have a perception about how much they've improved. And because
Yeah,
I have been working on multiple vibe coding projects, I'm really excited to use Fable and basically unleash it on some of these. I did that in the little window of time when we had access to it, and it did identify it because I asked it for security vulnerabilities. It identified them, and then I was able to fix them. The other thing that's interesting about this is you only get so much usage. Like I'm paying $20 a month, right? I have never paid the $100 and all this crazy amounts of money, which makes me wonder what I'd get if I was paying that. But what it gives you an incentive to do is not sit down and just have a marathon, for instance, vibe coding session, because you'll run out of tokens. And so it actually encourages me to do a little bit at a time.
yeah.
And I'm eager to use Fable. I'm going to watch to see how that utilization goes down faster. But like probably a better use of my 24 to 48 hour whatever tokens is going to be using the best model with the most effort, having it do what it can, and working on the project and then continuing later. So
Yeah, totally. And I would also say too that um I've done a little bit of vibe coding. Not and it's a rabbit hole that I want to fall into, so I spend more of my time putting up Linux servers instead, right? But the thing that I think is super interesting about that is that I do run some local models often on my Macs, and you can plug coding tools into that. And in fact, I did a couple of weeks ago just to see what it would spin up for me, and it was pretty good. It made it spent about 15 minutes writing the code, but it made a pretty fun game that I think is certainly an interesting way to do that particular piece.
So I'm going to share the CNBC article. This is one of the ones that Fable did suggest. This is from June 26th, and CNBC: OpenAI and Anthropic face new API reality as users shift from token maxing to efficiency. And it starts with a story of a CEO who basically moved from Claude to DeepSeek and is saving, I think it says, millions of dollars. But like, I haven't done a ton with DeepSeek, but it was so interesting, right, to be with ChatGPT for so long and then to see what Claude would do. It's been interesting to use Gemini both on our school, I'd say my spouse and I, on our school accounts versus our consumer accounts. One of the things that's big, I don't know if you've noticed this, Jason, is that when you're in a workspace account, we can't share out the conversation in Gemini. And that is terrible to me, but I think that's a Google level thing. I don't think our school admins have decided, because I have heard other people mention that. It's just so important to me to document what you've done. So I don't know if we'll get to the ISTE stuff, but part of the ISTE announcements with Google Classroom and Gemini and AI have to do with notebook and documentation, learning management, integration, and stuff like that. Our
Totally.
live viewer is saying DeepSeek version Pro V4 Pro is evidently nice, and
yeah, and I can
I have
confirm
fun
that
with it.
too. I buy bulk API credit from DeepSeek because it with my agent experimentations it does a really great job of kind of helping me manage that, and it's a tenth of the price of any other big model. And now it's funny because I just saw a headline pop up on my phone that apparently DeepSeek's version 4 models, Flash and Pro, are the worst of the major models for hallucination. But that's it. What are you gonna do? So
the thing that's interesting about coding is it becomes, well, some of it becomes apparent if it doesn't do what you want it to do. Now there's security vulnerabilities and other issues, but you can also have these models look at each other, right? So I think I'm going to maybe do a little experimentation with DeepSeek, especially because of that API cost factor. But then I could ask Fable to, analyze the code and, give me feedback. So using things on a production level where you're going to be repeatedly querying, and I know you're doing your agentic stuff. Costs are important.
Yeah, they really are. And one of the reasons why I say don't install OpenClaw, this is you need to keep this far away from student data, in part is because it's that kind of stuff isn't going to make it very quickly to schools because of the safety that we have to pay attention to on behalf of students. And I am very excited for the release of Google Spark later this summer. It is now available as part of the Mac desktop app for Ultra users. But
Google Spark?
Yeah, that's their agent platform.
Okay.
And so that's coming soon, and I will say it's not full agent, but I took the AI Studio, or I'm sorry, the AI Workplace Studio, which is different, or Workspace Studio, which is different than AI Studio. Google is not great at names, but I now have it sending me a brief 3 times a day about what email needs to be handled right away. And I'm not in my email as much as I was, and I'm doing a better job of keeping up with it. And I think that kind of stuff, will be a real powerful way to use AI, without compromising a lot of the things that I think regular AI use is quite controversial with.
I'm sure this is a rabbit hole, and if you want to wait for later, but you have an article for Claude on getting started with loops. Is that something you want to comment on, or do you want to save that for a deeper dive?
We're going to be talking about loops a lot, I think, in the next 6 months. So you heard it here first, folks. So I'll claim credit for that later this year if that ends up being true. But I do want to describe what a loop is, but it is agentic related. Codex one of the things that if you have a ChatGPT paid for account is that you can download the Codex app, which is like Claude Cowork of sorts, but you can use your ChatGPT account to do co-work like things. And the reason why I mention that is because it has a feature called goal. And goal means you don't give it a command via a prompt, you give it a goal that you would like Codex to accomplish, and then it will continue to work until the goal is done. Usually want to start off with a plan first, so it's not just spitting tokens out without any direction. But that's essentially what a loop is. A loop is that instead of giving it a command, you're giving it a goal, and it continues to work through the goal before it's done with that process. And so looping is actually, it's the first time I've heard of anything that I think could challenge the necessity of the prompting skill, because I do think prompting still remains incredibly important. But in a world where AI is more agentic and you can set goals instead of directions, that is something that I think could be quite profound.
And what I think we're going to continue to need are good communication skills.
Yes.
Because it is so powerful to use these AI tools to come up with the prompt. When I'm creating instructions for a Claude project, or I've talked about Flint AI, and they have wizards that'll basically do that. They'll use AI to build more precise, comprehensive instructions and better prompts. I think that's going to be a thing, but articulating What is your goal? Why do you want to accomplish it? Are there examples of it? Can you point to bodies of work or, you know, other sorts of things that are like that? Clear communication. So yeah,
absolutely.
it's going to continue to be important. Okay, sir. Well, I think we have several geeks of the week. Do you want to do anything before we do that? We could hit another article, or we could just geek of the week it.
I think my geeks of the week are going to take an hour and a half, so I think we could just safely move on. So, Dr. Fryer, what is your geeks of the week, sir?
Okay, well, yes, I just cannot restrain myself to do more than one. So, Civics of Technology Conference coming up again in August 6th and the 7th, civicsoftechnology.org. I attended their conference last year, really enjoyed it. The whole title is Against Tech Hype. They've got the keynoters announced, and I'm excited that this year I will be sharing a brief presentation. I think it's like 20 minutes out of a 45-minute presentation, but I'm calling it Your Feeds, Your Algorithms. And so I'll be telling a little bit of this ongoing story about reclaiming news feeds, but it is a good community. Dan Krutka, who's at the University of North Texas, I knew back in the Oklahoma City days, organizing ed camps together, is one of the key organizers there, and it is fantastic. So just sign up for that, and it's a live, Zoom-based conference. Great way to connect with other educators who are interrogating claims about AI and technology more broadly. And I think it's really good to have our thinking challenged. I made a little video and blog post, and I called it Streamlining Student Logins for Summer STEM Camps. I am actually just doing 6 summer camps, half-day summer camps. This week is my Scratch camp. But anyway, it's about how I basically am handling the logins and all this. I'm doing mainly younger kids, like rising 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. And lastly, on Saturday a week before Saturday, I got to do a workshop for the Daughters of the American Revolution in our local area. They had a 3-part genealogy workshop, and I did part 2, which was about oral history for genealogy. And I learned fantastic things. In fact, I'll drop into the show notes my Google Doc of like 35 pages or something of notes, but learning about the open standards for family trees, for, family heritage is like the Mormon Church's free collection of genealogical information, talking about DNA. You can spend a lot of money on subscriptions for these kinds of things, but there is an open standard so you can bring together your family trees. It's just really, really cool and good stuff. And I just love oral history. So that's it. I overshared, Jason. What do you got?
Well, I'm going to overshare a little bit too. So two categories of shares tonight. The first one is that we've talked about a couple of times over about a Whisper, which is the open source model from OpenAI that can listen to audio or listen to you speak and turn that into text. So it's a speech to text engine, and releasing that open source has done a really extraordinary thing, because there were a lot of apps that have been released in the last year or two that do a much better job than previous transcription tools. That's really great for accessibility. That's really great for a variety of reasons. But the fact that Whisper has been open source means that a lot of people are building alternative apps to ones that are otherwise expensive using the Whisper model. And so I just want to point out 3 of those today that are good examples of open source apps. One of them is called Open Whisper, another one's called Handy, and the third one's called Type Whisper. They have different feature sets, right? But it's all local, which means that all the processing of the AI happens on your local machine. And it works whether or not you have, because these are tiny models, well under 4 terabytes. In fact, the most common model is about 800 megs, which means that you can download it to your machine and it'll just fit into RAM. It's not going to be super speedy on a low RAM or an older machine, but it will work. But it's all local, so none of your speech gets sent elsewhere to process. And so that's something that I wanted to share. And then I know I've already shared this one, but I started playing with it more the other day because I had downloaded it for a different reason, and then noticed it had a bunch of new features. But we've talked about agentic browsing before. Perplexity has an agent browser. OpenAI has an agent browser. There are plugins for Chrome from Anthropic, but Browser OS is a Chromium-based browser, which means it's based on the same open source browser as Chrome, and it creates what is referred to as an MPC server in your local machine, so that things like Claude can talk to your browser and do things for you. Right now, that's nothing new. That these browsers that kind of can go on their own have been around for over a year now. But last night I had Claude talking to Browser OS, which is a browser, right? And I just tried some different stuff. I did demos with Browser OS last year, and it was interesting but not very useful. This time I had it doing research in the background on go find me 10 sites that offer openly licensed World War I images. And it just did it in the background for me. And when I was ready, I would just go back, and it would show me the list. And so, really mind blowing that these technologies work in that way, and I'm very excited about. I think we're not that far away from assuming we could do it safely and privately and yada yada yada. From having AI be able to fill out my travel paperwork, and that's really all I want. If that could just go away in my life, it would be a substantially better piece than filing all the forms I need to travel. And here it comes.
Wow. So lots of good stuff to explore, and we didn't really even get to ISTE announcements. So maybe we'll talk about those. Maybe we won't. But yeah, because there are other things going on in the world besides the boat show of the ISTE conference. But
I will also note that they did change their name too. They're now known as the International Society for something like they're still ISTE. Transforming Education, the International Society for Transforming Education, which
that's very interesting.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm not wild about that change because I think that I can think of some reasons why they might have strategically thought they should do that, but
they came together with ASCD though, and I think are becoming more curricular and just trying to be more mainstream education, not ed tech. That sucks, actually.
Yeah, and I will say too that I really enjoyed. I went to ISTE last year in San Antonio or Austin, San Antonio, and I very much enjoyed the conference, in part because of the curriculum focus. And so I did my share of tech sessions, but I also did a half dozen sessions on the curriculum side. And it was a really good balance for me because, I think there's a lot of pieces here, that we can certainly think about and figure out for the big picture. So,
wow. Interesting. Well, they didn't have to change their domain name because they're transforming education. So that's
yeah.
Acronym's the same. All right.
Well, Dr. Fryer, where can people find you on the internet?
Well, allegedly, as long as my virtual private server is still serving it, I'm switching over to Linode, so things are going to be faster soon. But I'm at wesfryer.com, and you can find a lot of links to places that I share, including Substack, where I have my media literacy with Wes at wfryer.substack.com. How about you, Dr. Neiffer?
Best place to find me is on LinkedIn, and then at my website, aicentrist.com. But hey, this is the EdTech Situation. We're a once-a-week podcast, mostly once-a-week podcast that happens on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Mountain, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and then sometime in the middle of the night UTC. If you can't catch us live, and we wish you would, we have an increasing number of live viewers that hang out in the YouTube chat. Then the best place to find us is YouTube itself, or wherever finer podcasts are aggregated. We hope you have a great week. Stay safe, stay savvy. Happy birthday, America. And we'll see you next time on the EdTech Situation Room. Good night.
Adios.